Today we're talking Sony PS5, a PlayStation developer speaks out on the platform versus the Xbox Series X. We've got that and so much more. Let's get into it. What is going on, guys? Steeler back again with yet another video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Maybe if you like the video, hit that like button, share it with a buddy, because we got some very interesting perspectives and information today. So I was going to read you guys this article about some statements from a Killzone developer, but you know what? I figured I would just show you my podcast instead, because again, more and more articles seem to be appearing after my podcast, and of course they're citing us as the source, but we are getting these developers on our show, Real Deal Xbox Podcast. I don't know if you guys have checked it out. Now, in this particular show, we did have two game developers on the panel, and they did say some very interesting things, not only about PS5's SSD basically being useless on most all games. There were also statements on ray tracing made, a really interesting discussion on Xbox Lockhart and how it probably, well, it won't hold back the Xbox Series X. But hey, that's provided that 4 teraflop number's real, and of course those 8 Zen 2 cores with maybe even 16 threads. So we'll get into that. The episode we are going to go over today will be linked down below. Really encourage you guys to check it out because context for every statement is important, good or bad. I always shoot people to the original source when I tell people or show people a clip of something. Now, not only did we have ex-Sony developer Chris Grammell, he worked for Sony for 14 years, Killzone, F1, and more. He worked on a ton of software on PS3, PS4, but we also had Optimus Code on, really cool guy, really insightful developer as well. We had two developers on the show, and guess what? Yes, I took that time to ask some of those questions to not only shut the haters down, because I can't tell them we know what we're talking about. They'd have to go do the research, and we know they don't do that. So why not ask these questions when two developers are on the show and have them answer the questions, right? Well, that's exactly what we did. Now let's get into the first discussion with developer Optimus Code on Xbox Lockhart or the Xbox Series S. He'll also speak on PS5's SSD. After that, we'll get into Chris Grammell's statements on massive quantum leaps in CPU power, the Xbox Series X staggering difference over PS5, and more. When it comes to the PlayStation 5, staggered or not is irrelevant. The fact that they're bringing more games to PC, that's going to continue. That's a thing they're going to invest more in. And I think that's obvious by everything they're saying, right? It has been for quite a while. Great kit for what is hopefully less money because it's less capable overall. But if those games come to PC, do you think that they'll just make that the minimum spec is a 5.5 gig SSD going when they do hit the PC to meet that same gameplay design? Or is that really a reason that hard drive is going to be utilized by 99% of developers in a gameplay design case?
So, good question. So 100% if their games go to PC at all, they will not be able to take advantage of the I/O architecture that they have built because their speed comes from more than just the SSD.
So is it safe to say that third-party developers will, I guess, code to the
lowest common denominator?
Yeah, they will code to those mechanical hard drives on PC is what they'll code.
No, I would say, okay, the Xbox Series S SSD is capable of this speed. The PlayStation 5 is capable of this speed. So, we're going to have to meet in between there, right? Is that what third-party developers are going to do to take advantage of it?
No, because the PC is there. And you're going to look at what's the average speed on the PC, and it's not going to be either one of those.
Yeah, not even close.
That's unless they raise the minimum specs, D, like you said earlier, that the lower end hardware will become the new baseline, and all of the games will be designed around that lowest common denominator. I want real legit next gen experiences. So yeah, there's not a doubt in my mind that developers will always design to the lowest common denominator.
So let me run this by you real quick. Given that every Xbox game is on PC, wouldn't that lowest common denominator be lower than Lockhart?
So that's what Cope told me. So again, I don't know the specs. So this is all
okay. Well, let me here. I'll throw it out there for you. It's going to be a 4 teraflop Navi. Just hypothetically, even if you don't want to believe it, so 4 T-flop around. That's the target Navi, which is around 6 GCN today. You've got 8 Zen 2 core with likely 16 threads as well, and an SSD. So given
and 8 gigabytes of
Yeah,
DDR6
we're hearing
RAM.
8 gigs of RAM, but they're going to have that pull of virtual memory as well.
Well, so it depends on the vision of the designer, but there are 2 questions in place. So the first question is, would the PC then be the true bottleneck that's holding everything back? And if those specs that you said are true, then it would be the PC, unless they change the minimum requirements. Because now I think the average minimum requirements are like a 1060 or whatever, might be even lower than that.
So the Lockhart pretty much makes that obsolete, right? So I was thinking that they would just keep the Xbox One S, priced at $100-$150 as the base model, and go on up. But I could
remember when they phased this hardware out, like the OG Xbox has been out of production for how many years now, right? You can still buy Halo Infinite in 2020 and play it on that 2013 VCR. That's kind of their idea. Look, you can keep your Xbox One X going forward. It'll work for 1, maybe 2 years, Matt Booty said. But after that, there's a cutoff. And that's about the time developers start getting those games out that are taking advantage of more threads, right? So that's kind of the thing. There's a big picture here. Chris Grinnell. Hey, shout out to you, buddy. This is a guy I've been teasing for a little bit, and then I ended up slapping Optimus on the same show, and this might actually be even better because we got a couple different insights here. But Chris is former Sony developer for Killzone. He's worked on F1. I guess you could let you tell the story, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Hello, everyone in the chat. Yeah, I've worked with Sony for around 14-15 years. Based in the kind of Liverpool studio, and then spent
Let's hear what Chris
big game the big game changer of the next gen consoles is the CPU. So you completely removing that bottleneck. There's no question that the GPUs are incredibly powerful. What they're going to be pushing around, but it's removing that kind of massive bottleneck that was the CPU. It was the reduction in what you could do with AI, reduction in how you kind of stream parts of the world in and things like that. So that's the biggest game changer of next gen consoles, and I think that's going to be the kind of catalyst that allows something like the Lockhart to kind of coexist with the Series X and it not have.
It's going to be because if you remember, Chris is the one in the headlines not long ago talking about the staggering difference that he's hearing about from different developers. And again, this is just math that I've been talking about, but Chris has actually got a little bit more insight on things like this. He's heard a lot more. What do you have for us? What have you heard? And is there any more context, anything you'd like to say to those people that were hating on you for simply reporting what you were told by multiple developers?
Yeah, so obviously I got a lot of shit off of lots of fanboys when I kind of said that staggering sentence, and it was something that developers that I've been speaking to utilised. Some said significant, staggering. There was all different types of English and wording used, but there was kind of an overwhelming difference that the machine that kind of Microsoft have put together, it is a beast compared to what Sony have put together. And I think Sony have kind of rested on the laurels a little bit of they didn't really kind of appreciate what Xbox were going to try and do in terms of this kind of power narrative.
You think they got caught off guard?
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that they got caught off guard. There's no question that Microsoft have been working a little bit closer with AMD on some of the technologies that they're working on. I'm sure that's going to cause a stir with a lot of people out there for me saying that, but they've also kind of gone with starting to kind of hit 4K and decent frame rate and things like that. But an element that I'm hearing that a lot of you guys are hearing as well, so it's nothing new, is it's on this kind of next gen features. So it's the real time ray tracing. There's been a bit of a drop in that. You can see that by the targeted CUs that they've gone with on the GPU side of things, compared to what Xbox have put together. And that's massive. And then if you look at kind of the throughput and the ray tracing capability, then you start to get to those levels where you can understand why developers would be saying it's kind of staggering. So you've got the math, but then you start looking at kind of real-time ray tracing capability, what some of those kind of
Now again, take it all with a grain of salt, as the product is not here, but I absolutely think he is giving us the information that he has, and it is from a reputable source. Some of these claims also line up with the information I've been talking about for quite some time. Basic math, that is, of course. It's going to be a pretty big performance delta between the two systems for what is likely a $100 difference. That is my plan. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, no. Besides, either way, both systems are going to be awesome for the money, the most balanced consoles of all time.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an element of the kind of overclocking thing is something that's kind of, or the boost mode, sorry, is something that's kind of, arrived a bit later on.
You say maybe developer feedback drove that decision to shift power from CPU to GPU and back and forth.
No, I just think
first party maybe didn't say anything. You don't think?
I think it's like the T-flop count, and how kind of underpowered it is. I mean, with the big thing really is the amount of CUs and stuff. That's pretty. It's pretty huge when you're starting to look at doing kind of real time, ray tracing.
I'm trying to get people to understand that, Chris, but I mean, I can't. I can't wait to get to your main topic, man. It's gonna be great. You're right.
But yeah, I mean the kind of yo-yo effect, or what Optimus was saying. We were talking earlier about Lockhart and Series X, and the lowest common denominator being PC and things like that. So or the lowest targeted spec. And I think where PS5 is potentially going to struggle is some of those kind of big third-party, open world, super kind of spectacular, as I say, kind of open world games where, if they're trying to throw, a hell of a lot in terms of, AI and, streaming kind of the world in and all of these kind of other elements, then those decisions where people are kind of, winding the CPU down a bit to get the kind of, the T-flops up and to get that kind of visual fidelity, you're probably going to see it flip the other way, where they start to kind of wind the T-flops down. We start to look at more of a kind of 9 T-flop console and so on and so forth, because they need to kind of deliver that rich, AI, the worlds and things like that. So
it'll still look amazing, though. It'll still look phenomenal.
No, yeah.
But yeah, that's what we've been saying, man. As time goes on, you're only going to see more need for more CPU overhead. But Chris, what were you saying about, you're saying basically over time, you think they're gonna have to ramp the GPU down and clock that CPU up?
Yeah, so I think depending on obviously the game that they're putting out. So obviously your first party studios are going to target every aspect of that console. They're going to utilize the SSD, they're going to utilize the GPU as well as they can, the CPU, all of that kind of architecture. But it's when you come down to the kind of third party games that make up what arguably 70-80% of your gaming catalog that kind of appears on your consoles. It's those guys that are going to have interesting kind of decisions on whether they kind of wind the visuals down a bit because they want more, they want to utilize that kind of brand new CPU and all of the bottlenecks that were kind of remove them from previous generations. What I really care about is the FPS for me. I agree with D-Batch earlier. Get rid of these 30 frames per second games. You want 60 and above. And I would take the res hit personally for a smoother game.
I would do. Man, Chris is on a roll here, and so many people are going to be upset because he basically gave what he knows to be the truth about PS5. Bottom line, what I'll say I definitely agree with is that ray tracing capability being vastly less than the Series X. We've been talking about that for a while, as well as just general rasterization on the GPU side. You're talking about a significant chunk of pixels here that can be turned into frame rate, resolution, etc. So there is a lot of capability on how they'll actually have that edge. Add to that the over 100 gigabytes per second more memory bandwidth, which will help it do all of this at a much higher resolution. Meanwhile, as they confirmed in the podcast, 2 separate developers in the same show, PS5's SSD benefits being game-changing or a true shift is actually not any of those things if the game is built on anything other than a PS5. If you watch the clip, you know why we have our questions about those games coming to PC eventually. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm getting both day one. But hey, let me know your thoughts down below. Big shout out to Chris Grimmel and of course Optimus Code for coming on to the show, having a blast yesterday. Big shout out to every one of you who took the time to check this video out. It really helps, guys, more than you know. And of course, if you liked it, hit the like button, show a buddy or 5 million, and subscribe. The source link is, well, it's my podcast. So I'll link that podcast and that article I showed on screen earlier. Watch that whole thing. Great show if you are technically minded. It was a pretty tech-heavy show. And again, thank you for everything you guys do. I am going to go die for 8 hours. I'll talk to you guys later. I'm Dealer. I'm out.